So what we do here is we just kind of have a conversation, and basically we want to share your story.
Yeah.
And you know, no curveballs, none of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's all, you know, anything you feel like, I don't want to talk about that. Then
yeah. So I mean, I can start by talking about me and my family, my professional background.
Yeah.
Maybe what's led me to public service, what I've done, what I plan to do in the future.
Sure. We can talk about a little bit of your pharmacy background, all those types of things.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, before we get started, do you want me to start off by saying my name or anything like that?
I want you to just do what feels natural.
Okay.
How about this?
I just didn't know if this was a sort of a back and forth conversation or.
No. You and I have had lunch together.
Okay.
We've sat in meetings together.
Yep. Okay.
We're not journalists.
Okay. Got it.
We found the idea to share the story. I mean, I'll do a voiceover later.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And we'll talk. We'll introduce you as Commissioner Stacy White.
Sure.
And you can pick it up from there.
Sure. Well, I'm Stacy White. I represent District 4 on the County Commission. I'm a sitting county commissioner. District 4 is eastern and southern Hillsborough County, primarily areas east of I-75. I go, as I like to say, I cover from Plant City to Sun City.
Nice.
So it's a large district geographically because the 4 districts are roughly divided by population count. So with my area being suburban and rural, we have a lower population density, which means that my area geographically is much larger than the other districts. So I actually touch Pasco, Polk, and Manatee in my district. So starting in the north in the Plant City area, I pick up areas like a lot of Brandon, a lot of Valrico, Fishhawk, parts of Riverview, communities like Ruskin, Waimama, Balm, so it's that eastern and southern portion.
That's pretty diverse.
Definitely a diverse constituency, and I enjoy the opportunity to serve a diverse constituency. So I'm a pharmacist professionally, been a pharmacist for 22 years, deeply rooted in this community. My family on both sides, we go back many generations. So
right here?
Right here in Hillsborough County.
Great.
So I grew up here. I attended East Bay High School.
Okay.
Went off to the...
That down on Big Bend?
It is. Okay. Yep, it's on Big Bend Road. When I was in school, the nearest high school was Brandon High School. And East Bay and Brandon were a big rivalry back then.
Okay.
But fast forward to today, and you now have Armwood, Bloomingdale, Riverview, Leonard, Spoto. You've had all these new high schools, Newsom, so you've had all these new high schools sprout up. So, you know, so the kids today are probably asking themselves, what's this East Bay Brandon rivalry all about? You know, Leonard's our rivalry.
That was generations before them.
Yeah. Sure, so it's funny how things change. But when I finished pharmacy school in the mid-90s, my wife Barbie and I moved back to Hillsborough County. It's funny because we knew of each other in high school, but we didn't really know each other well. We actually met at a party up at University of Florida that was kind of an East Bay gathering for all the kids that had gone to East Bay that went on to UF to get together. So I met her there, and the rest is history, as they say. So
wow. So you guys went to the same high school and then went to the same college, university?
The same college, same university. Yep, and that's where we started dating and then ultimately became engaged and married after college. So we settled in Valrico after college, and we've had 3 kids.
Okay.
I just took my oldest off to college and got her settled in. She chose Auburn University, believe it or not. And
okay.
When I'm kidding around with people, I say, well, at least she didn't choose Georgia or FSU. So this Gator can live with her being an Auburn Tiger.
Okay.
And we're so proud of her. She's attending on both an academic scholarship and an Army ROTC scholarship.
Really?
So she'll be serving in the Army after college.
That's great.
Yeah, and then I have another daughter that's in high school and a son that's in middle school here in Hillsborough.
I know your son still go to Mulrennan?
He goes to Mulrennan.
Yeah, my son goes to Mulrennan. We've seen each other there before.
That's right. Yeah, it's a small world.
Yeah.
So So we're really proud of him. So my kids being in the public school system here is really what first led me to seek public office and to serve as an elected official. So I actually ran for the Hillsborough County School Board in 2010. I was successful.
Yes.
Served on the school board from 2010 to 2014. I really enjoyed that experience. I loved being in a leadership role with our school district. But I had a lot of people asking me to look at this county commission seat. And I've always had an interest in what county commissioners are involved in. How do we better manage our growth in the county? How do we solve our traffic problems? Things like that. So I listened to the calling, ran for county commission in 2014. I was successful in that bid, and it's hard to believe that I've almost finished a 4-year term, and I'm seeking re-election at this point.
Wow. That's a lot going on in that short period of time.
Absolutely.
From what I understand is that your school board seat, was that the one that Melissa Snively stepped into?
That is correct.
Okay.
Melissa Snively succeeded me on the school board, and she's doing a great job.
And is
She's a
now
great
running
school
for
board.
re-election.
She is running for re-election as well. It's hard to believe that almost 4 years have passed.
Yeah, it seems really quick. We spoke with Melissa here.
Yeah.
Obviously a Florida Gator as well.
Yes, yes.
So I'm sure you were okay with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So county commissioners, I'm going to gather that most people really don't know what they do.
Yeah. You're right. And as I like to say, people really get worked up about presidential elections and elections for governor and things like that. But what I always tell people is that it's your local government that really impacts your life more on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
So I strongly encourage people to better understand their local government and what their local elected officials do. Now, your county commissioners are essentially your board of directors for the local county government. We have 7 commissioners here in Hillsborough County. Now, I mentioned 4 districts. So we have 4 commissioners that represent specific geographic areas of the county. The other 3 commissioners serve at large on a county-wide basis.
Okay.
So that makes a 7-member board. So we're like the board of directors. We hire the county administrator, which is like the CEO, and the county administrator carries out the day-to-day business functions of the county.
Are they
for
accountable
the
to the county administrator? Is the county administrator report to the board of directors, basically the county commission?
That's correct. He
Okay.
reports to the county commission. He's under contract by us, so it's the county commission that has the ability to hire and fire the county administrator. The county commission has 2 other direct reports. The county attorney reports directly to us as well. We also have a county internal auditor that reports directly to us. That's so that we can oversee the legal and the audit functions independent of the county administrator. It's sort of that balance of power concept.
Sure.
in
The checks and
government.
balances.
So, checks and
Sure.
balances,
Okay.
absolutely. So the county commission, in overseeing the local government, when you look around and you look at county roads, county sidewalks, county parks, our county libraries, we have an environmental land system, of course your water and sewer system, if you're on public water and public sewer, all those things fall under the county commission's purview.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It's a lot of responsibility. We
with
have a
that-
lot of moving parts and pieces to local government.
So who fields the complaints?
Oftentimes it's the county commissioner's office. I'm going to use the term bureaucracy, but I don't necessarily mean to use it in a disparaging way.
Okay.
But we're a county that's 1,000 square miles in geographic size, and our population is over 1.4 million. We're larger than some states. So as you can imagine, county government is a pretty big bureaucracy.
Sure.
Most folks don't know who to pick up the phone and call if they see an issue with local government. So the person they turn to is their local commissioner. Sometimes their one of their county-wide commissioners. We are just pleased and just delighted to have the opportunity to serve and to help people solve problems with local government. So the phone calls and the emails that we receive to the office, are oftentimes, about a pothole in front of someone's house, solid waste, which I didn't mention a moment ago. So maybe their trash didn't get picked up, something of that nature. Maybe a sidewalk that's being lifted up by some
Would you
tree
get
roots.
a complaint, really,
like that.
someone didn't pick up my trash, even if it's like the one time?
We do. We
Seems
do.
a little
and,
minute.
Look, no job's too small for us. We want to solve all problems. Oftentimes, it might be, an elderly individual that, that's going to have difficulty in, taking the trash can back and forth or something like that. And,
Okay.
and we'll get the problem solved when they call us. But yeah, people definitely turn to their commissioner
I'm
when
sure.
when they have issues with local government. So.
Okay. So I'm hoping that I'm correct here. You were a chaplain for a while?
Yes, so I'm not a member of the clergy. I'm not a professional chaplain, but the county commission, we have 3 officers on the board. We have a chair, a vice chair, and a chaplain. Now, many boards would call that third position the board secretary or something of that nature. We designate ours as the board chaplain because we open each meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance and an invocation.
Okay.
So since that person's delivering that invocation, we call them the board chaplain. So
I see.
I'm pleased to say that I've been in leadership on the board, even as a new commissioner. I became chaplain in my second year rather, on the board. Third year, I actually had the opportunity to serve as chair. And this year, I'm board chaplain once again. So
Okay. So you're able to move to different officer positions, right? It's not like once you term off, then...
Correct. So the board holds an election once a year. Every November, we go through a reorganization meeting, and we choose a chair, a vice chair, and a chaplain. And there are no prohibitions against serving consecutively. So
Okay.
someone could be reelected by their peers to serve again as chair or vice chair or chaplain. We also pick our outside board appointments at that same reorganization meeting. A lot of folks don't realize that county commissioners serve on oftentimes several other boards as well. So just as an example, just to go over the boards that I serve on the HART board. That's the Hillsborough Area Regional Transit Authority.
Okay.
Basically, that's our bus system as it stands today, but if we ever expand into a more robust mass transit system, that would fall under the HART agency as well.
I see.
But the bylaws state that 4 commissioners serve on that board. I serve on the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. That's a transportation intensive board as well. And I'm also very interested in conservation and preservation of land for future generations. So I'm pleased to have the opportunity to serve on a couple of boards that are conservation related. One is the Florida Aquarium Board of Directors. And a lot of people might not recognize that as a conservation related board, but the Florida Aquarium is so much more than just an aquarium. We really are involved in a lot of activities that are conservation related as well. And I also serve on the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Policy Board.
Wow.
And the Tampa Bay Estuary Program does so many great things to keep Tampa Bay beautiful and healthy. Tampa Bay, the water body, that
Right,
is,
okay.
not the region, but the actual bay itself. So.
Wow. So there's a lot going on, obviously, this election cycle.
Yes.
There was a lot going on not long ago where we had some traffic pattern, possible changes in the traffic pattern,
Yeah.
different things like that. And we have this referendum that's trying to get put on the ballot. So your phone must be ringing off the hook.
It is. We have a lot going on. I'm pleased to say that I was part of a coalition on the county commission that tightened our belts, and we committed $800 million to transportation over the next 10 years without raising taxes. We were able to capture new growth from increases in property values and new construction. Take some of that new growth, set it aside into a transportation trust fund, and it amounts by conservative estimates to about 800 million over the next 10 years. So you're going to see a lot of work with repairing our infrastructure, which is, you know, literally crumbling beneath our feet in some cases.
I wouldn't mind if you guys worked a little bit on Valrico north of 60.
Yes, Valrico Road is on the list, coming soon actually. You're about to see Bell Shoals Road widen. That's actually a developer-funded project from the
millage and
Lake
impact
development.
fees and such?
No, actually, it was a required developer contribution from the old DRI, Development of Regional Impact, from the Hutto Lake development.
Okay.
That has been in the hopper for, I wouldn't be exaggerating to say 20 years, and it's finally coming to fruition now. And
so the traffic there, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
The traffic there is so terrible that I've bailed, even as recent as Wednesday on a board meeting 2 days ago, because I couldn't get down.
Yeah.
I couldn't get down Bell Shoals. What is the construction going to do to traffic there over the next, however long that takes, 20 more years?
Well, they're going to do it in phases.
Okay.
And they tell me that they're going to keep traffic flowing. I'm a realist, though, okay? I know that even though they tell me that they're going to keep traffic flowing just fine, I know we're going to have some headaches.
Well, it doesn't flow just fine now.
Exactly. So what I'm going to ask folks to do is to just hang in there and just see the light at the end of the tunnel and to see the finish line. And once that's finished, we're going to notice a tremendous difference. It's going to be widened to a 4-lane road.
Well, geez, about time.
It's about time.
It's about
long
time.
overdue.
Yeah.
Long overdue.
And so, again, we're talking specific projects. What about the Lithia Pinecrest issue that's happening there? It's probably even more cumbersome than Bell Shoals, right? Runs a longer distance.
Yeah, and that one is controversial, believe it or not. There is still a faction of folks out there that don't want to see that road widened. And that surprised me as I was navigating the political waters of that. But I do have that project funded as part of that $800 million that I talked about. Actually, that makes up a good portion of it. That's almost a $100 million project. And I have that in there. We are going to do a PD&E study on it, but...
Is that where there are some challenges? Because the surveying portion has to be point A to point Z, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
And so you're having some challenges around X, Y, and Z.
X, Y, and Z, and then also the faction that doesn't want to see the road widen. And by the way, I want to listen to all stakeholders, so I can understand the concerns and I want to listen to them. But at this point, I think I hear the other camp speaking a little more loudly that it's time to widen that road. It's long overdue.
And it's necessary not only for people who live in that area, right?
Yeah.
Because people traveling through the area, traveling to and from.
Absolutely.
You'll have, I think there's a little bit of, well, I like things the way I like them, and I don't want the change. I don't want to have, speeding cars, or I don't want to have all of this traffic or pollution, or whatever their reasoning is.
Yeah.
It's almost like, well, we don't want to share this beautiful area we have with a lot of new growth.
That's right.
But it's coming, and
Yep.
it's a freight train.
It is, indeed.
Yeah.
That's a good segue, really, to my number one issue. It's at the top of my platform is better managing and better planning for our growth. I like to get that message out as often as I can because it's very easy to get labeled as a person that's anti-growth. And I'm not an anti-growth person, but being so deeply rooted here, having grown up here, I've seen some growth that's occurred that just didn't seem to be real well planned. And I think we have to do a better job of planning in the future. Ironically, that could mean more intense growth and more density in certain areas. Could mean less density in certain areas.
Okay.
And I talk a lot about giving people a true choice when they move to Hillsborough County, a choice between urban living, suburban living, or rural living. And I think we have to preserve all three choices.
And I think we have all three that are readily available for people.
We indeed do.
Yeah.
We indeed do.
So I've seen a lot of growth. I've been in this area for 12 years or so. And things have really expanded rapidly.
Yes.
We've gotten through the economic downturn, right, where there was just inventory of homes all over the place. And it almost seemed justified to have the road that's very narrow with a wide easement. And being a native New Yorker, right? So most of the growth is up.
Yep.
And, you know, I mean, there's probably, what, 10, 11 million people there now. But when I drive down Bell Shoals, I say, why? There's more easement than there is road. And they put the power lines very close to the road, so it's difficult to widen.
Yep.
And I think about it and I say, it seems that this is going to be very, very expensive to change.
That is some of the poor planning of the past that I'm referring to. We have to do a better job looking forward.
I absolutely agree. And so, you know, there's this referendum, right, for transportation. Did I interrupt you?
No, you're fine.
So, you know, we've heard about it. I'm sure you've sat in a few meetings. I've sat and listened to a presentation, and I thought, okay, well, they want to put, you know, some tax raising going on there to pay for that. And some of it will go to Hart. Some of it will go to unincorporated, very small amount, unincorporated Hillsborough County. And then it seems like some areas that don't really affect us here are going to get a large portion of that based on that presentation.
So I have issues with the referendum for several reasons, many of which you've just mentioned. I don't see that East Hillsborough and South Hillsborough will really benefit tremendously from it. So in that sense, we're asked to pay in without a lot coming back in return. I question whether or not rail is the technology of the future. Is it the technology of the future or the technology of the past? You know, we might be able to better accomplish mass transit needs with BRT, bus rapid transit, which is a rubber tired option that's more nimble, and you're not married, so to speak, to this light rail infrastructure.
It's not finite in the construction.
That is correct.
Okay.
You know, even ride sharing like Uber and Lyft, you know, who would have imagined even 5 years ago that a service like Uber and Lyft would exist? And that also plays a role in what we call the first mile, last mile problem, which is how do you get from your home to a mass transit option, then from a mass transit option to your work building or wherever you're going.
Sure.
Uber and Lyft can play a role in that first mile, last mile conundrum.
Well, cost effectiveness now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So even in New York City, there's what they call that is the two-fare zone.
Yes.
Right. So you're taking a bus to a train.
Yep.
And that's challenging because some people want to live a little bit more suburban and out of the way.
Yep.
But it would cost more money for them to get to work.
Absolutely.
And even Uber and Lyft, you're still putting more cars on the road.
Yep.
And it may be on a road that's not necessarily engineered or designed for that growth.
Yes. Yes.
And so the light rail, I think, I see your point on that because it's more finite, right? So once you build a rail, it's there.
It's there.
And, you know, rubber tires.
And it's a high front end capital cost when you're talking about light rail. The other thing that I struggle with this proposed referendum is, you know, it's not just a referendum. It's actually an amendment to the county charter that they're seeking.
Okay.
And part of the proposed charter language is to have a committee, almost an independent committee that will oversee the expenditures of these revenues. And I really struggle with that because you're putting oversight in the hands of people other than those that have been duly elected by the citizens. So
and may not even
there
be
with
directly
oversight.
Impacted as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see that.
The third thing that I struggle with is that it's over a 14% tax hike. You know, they like to call it a penny sales tax increase, but when you go from 7 cents on the dollar to 8 cents on the dollar, that's over a 14% increase in sales tax. And that would make Hillsborough County with the highest sales tax rate in the state of Florida. I really struggle with that. If you're a person that's looking to move and you're doing your homework and you look at Hillsborough County and you see that we have the highest sales tax rate in the state of Florida, that certainly must be a factor in making a decision as to whether or not you want to move here. So I want to make sure that, you know, that we're not going to lose the forest for the trees here with this proposal.
That's a good point. You know, most people aren't seeing it as a percentile, they're seeing it as a penny.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so the value of that is, like you said, 14%.
Yep.
And I know many people who live just beyond the county line.
Yep.
They live on County Line Road in
Yep.
Pasco.
Yep.
And they live just north, and their commute's not so great, but
Yep.
they have a little bit of property. The property taxes are lower.
Yep.
I was just speaking to one of the landlords in this particular complex, and he was showing me how his property taxes took a giant jump. And he's like, this is going to price me out. And so how can we tell a guy like that, well, we're not raising your taxes,
Yeah.
but you're looking at maybe $900 increase from last year
Yeah.
on your property.
Yep.
And so asking him to now chip in
Yep.
an additional 14%,
Yes.
that's going to probably drive him into a different county.
Yes.
Yeah. So if this is an amendment, and it looks like areas that aren't in as much need as we are, what does it look like as far as getting on the ballot for that? What are the chances of that?
Well, they've already had the proper number and percentage of signatures certified to be on the ballot.
Was that 49,000?
49,000 overall, and then they had to meet certain percentage thresholds in each district, and they've done that. I would not be surprised to see some legal challenges over the issue of the independent committee and things like that. There's also a required audit from the state, which has already been done. I think they'll probably be okay with the audit. I'm not sure about any challenges that may stand in their way, but assuming that they clear all those hurdles, then the initiative will be on the ballot in November for the general election.
And so, okay, so it's safe to say that more residents reside in unincorporated Hillsborough County.
That's right. It's actually currently approximately 2/3, 1/3. 2/3 in unincorporated, 1/3 in Tampa. We have two very small municipalities also, Temple Terrace and Plant City, but by and large, it's about 2/3 unincorporated, 1/3 in the city of Tampa.
So it would behoove those people, if this is on the ballot, to understand that so they don't vote for something that's going to hurt them.
That's correct.
That's why we're having this conversation right now.
I would ask residents of East Hillsborough County to look long and hard at that proposal and ask themselves if it benefits our area of the county, the
Sure.
unincorporated area of the county. Frankly, I'm not so sure that it does.
I am not so sure that it does either. And I tell you what, they're getting most of their signatures from unincorporated Hillsborough County.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that signals that it's going to do well on the ballot, though. I was personally approached to sign their form, and when they approached me, they made no mention of a tax increase. I don't know what it was like when they approached you.
Well, they mentioned that it would be an improvement to the transportation, and circled. I said, well, how does that affect this area? And then they circled unincorporated Hillsborough County.
Yeah.
With a red felt pen.
Yes. Yeah. So that's all fine and swell, but I think when people start learning between now and November that we're talking about a 14% tax hike, highest tax rate in the state of Florida, and oh, by the way, if you live in unincorporated Hillsborough County, you probably don't get a lot out of this. I think you'll see, perhaps a shift in how people feel about this.
As long as that message is sent and received.
Yes.
And I'm glad we have this opportunity to even talk about this. Now, people that are outside, I mean, we may have people in other areas that are listening, but I don't really care because we're talking about right here first.
That's right.
I do care about those people. I think this needs to be heard.
Yep.
It's very important in this selection cycle.
Yep.
And what better person to have talking about it than a county commissioner who sits on multiple boards that involve transportation.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming. I know that you're really busy, especially now with, but you don't have a primary, correct?
I'm not being primaried, thank goodness.
Is there an opponent?
I do have an opponent in the general election. I don't mind stating for the record. I mean, it's I'm going to be on the ballot as such anyway that I'm a Republican. Okay. I do have a Democratic challenger in the general election. I'm never one to take things for granted or count my chickens. I'm most definitely campaigning and campaigning hard. I will tell you that District 4 has traditionally been a strong Republican district. I don't expect that to change. So I consider it a vote of confidence that I'm not being challenged in the primary.
By your party?
By someone within my own party. So,
Okay.
But again, I'm not taking anything for granted. I'm campaigning hard, and I'm going to make sure I win this race in November.
I think part of that is your name recognition, your experience, and your roots in the community.
Yeah.
Many people know who you are. Many people recognize the impact you've had here.
Yeah.
And, you know, to be honest with you, it doesn't matter to me whether you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. I personally don't like the idea of having teams, and I have this conversation many times.
Sure.
You know, claiming you're a Republican is fine.
Yep.
Claiming you're a Democrat is fine.
Yep.
So where do the people that are independents lie?
Yeah, well, the independence or no party affiliation is actually the fastest growing affiliation in the United States. So, you know, many people feel just the way you feel. Many of our founding fathers, you know, didn't believe in a party system, and I can tell you that a lot of local governments have nonpartisan seats on their local commissions and councils. In fact, we just took a vote. This is another thing that'll be on your November ballot because it's going to be up to the people to ultimately decide. But the county commission passed a charter amendment proposal to make our 5 constitutional officers nonpartisan.
Okay.
And if I may just name them,
Sure.
because people are probably thinking, what's a constitutional officer? They're called that because they're created in the Florida state constitution. That's your sheriff, your tax collector, your property appraiser, your supervisor of elections, and your clerk of the circuit court. So when you look at what these people do, like law enforcement, elections, collecting your tax dollars,
sure.
you know, those shouldn't be partisan seats.
I agree.
And so we, the county commission, have taken a vote. It passed to send it to the people and ask the people if they want that to be incorporated into the county charter. So if that passes in November, those 5 seats will become nonpartisan. We left the county commission alone because we're, by and large, a legislative body, and I think, you know, there is the belief that party affiliation, at least in today's political environment, you know, is it's something that people want to know when you're running to be on a legislative body.
There's this new teamism,
yeah.
right? I think that's what's sweeping
Yep.
our nation in the past couple of years.
Yep.
And with all due respect,
Yep.
I'll ask you this question because
Yep.
you said you left the county commission alone.
Yep.
Because it's legislative.
Yep.
So that can sound to some people like, oh, so you pass laws and that's why you want to have a party affiliation. That could be construed as that, right?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're making legislative decisions, though, people by and large, you know, they, again, at least in today's political environment, it helps them to better understand who you are when you're running with a party. So
I can see that. I don't adhere to that.
Yeah.
Right? And I say, well, we, meaning voters,
Yep.
are not necessarily allowed to kind of detach themselves from a party for the primaries.
Right.
Right? So I'm kind of forced into either the red team or the blue team.
Right.
And you know, I say we should probably look at getting that changed as well.
Yeah.
Because it almost says to an independent thinker, we don't want you to be an independent thinker.
Well, Florida is a closed primary state, and the county commission has no control over that. So I'm not even going to open that can of worms. You know. So,
you know, the good thing is that I can.
Yeah.
I can ask
Absolutely.
those. I can ask
Yep.
those questions, and
Yep.
and
Yep.
ultimately,
So-
you know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for you, and
Yeah.
I do think that your board seat for the school board was nonpartisan.
School boards are nonpartisan, and that is prescribed, I believe, prescribed in state law, if I'm not mistaken.
Why do you think that is? State law kind of, the state intervened with that, and
I think the philosophy is similar to what our philosophy was with the constitutional officers. I think the rationale way back when that was instituted is that, we're talking about the school system, we're talking about educating kids. There's really no place for partisan politics in that.
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
I think the sheriff also should be nonpartisan, as you mentioned, all of those positions. I think that should probably pass pretty easily.
I suspect that's going to pass by a pretty wide margin.
It just makes sense no matter which quote unquote team you root for.
Yes.
I think there's just some things that are common sense.
Absolutely.
And I like to think that the common man has common sense.
Absolutely.
Right? And not necessarily going with whatever your team affiliation is.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about this Bloomingdale issue that came up. The changing it from one way to the other. I'm sure that stimulated a lot of phone calls.
It stimulated a lot of phone calls. So I don't think it's a secret that was my idea. I asked that it be explored and only explored.
For the listeners, tell them.
Just to hear from people.
Tell them what we're talking about here.
So I wanted county staff and the planning commission staff to explore the concept of a reversible lane on Bloomingdale Avenue that's westbound in the morning for rush hour going into Tampa and eastbound in the evening for rush hour traffic coming back home to the suburbs. That's been nixed. I want to make sure your audience knows that. In no uncertain terms.
Well,
I just wanted to hear
about
it
and be able to share why. Many people just say, well, that's a crazy idea. That's not going to work. We do have expressways that do that.
Yeah. So again, I asked that it be explored, but I've heard loud and clear from the people that there's just no appetite for it. But here's my rationale. As I drive Bloomingdale Avenue, as you know, most of Bloomingdale from approximately Bell Shoals to 301, most of that stretch is a bi-directional turn lane in the middle.
Otherwise known as suicide
lanes. They're also known as suicide lanes. Now, when I drive Bloomingdale, I see long stretches of that suicide lane that's not being utilized. In fact, there are some stretches of it that run through land that's undeveloped and doesn't seem that it's going to be developed anytime in the near future.
Like vacant lots on each side kind of thing?
Correct. There's even that cypress dome that you run through, and there's the bi-directional turn lane. Nobody's going to turn into the cypress trees, you know. So what I saw there is a wasted resource. So I see a fifth lane of asphalt that's already bought and paid for by the taxpayers. So I thought to myself, how can we put that resource to use? It's already there, it's already bought and paid for, it's an existing infrastructure. How can we have it not be a wasted resource? That's where I had the idea of turning it into a reversible lane, but the appetite's just not there right now. I respect that. I'm an elected official that listens to the people, so I just totally nixed the idea. But who knows? Maybe in a couple years, folks will be ready to talk about it and revisit it. And if it can't be a reversible turn lane, I would ask, how can we better utilize that resource? Because it's a good 5 miles or so of asphalted street lane, that
some of it has
for something.
A 2-foot wide divider, and there's nothing there. So when I first initially heard that, I thought that sounds insane. But I was told Bloomingdale. Not only, I thought all of Bloomingdale. And I thought, well, my business is on Bloomingdale. Commissioner Stacy White's insane.
So I don't think the Planning Commission communicated the idea as well as they should have. So the idea would be to have a fifth lane, and that could either be the center lane or the road could be restriped somehow and have it maybe be the lane to the south and the lane to the north, something like that, and just have one lane. So the idea would be that you would have 3 lanes going into Tampa in the morning and 3 lanes coming in the afternoon. Maybe that didn't get communicated real well.
I don't think it did initially.
That's been studied, not just studied, excuse me, it's actually been implemented in some other states and has worked successfully, you know, you have to have a lot of signage and signalization and things like that to keep people going the right way.
Do you think you would even need maybe some barriers?
Perhaps some barriers, particularly at some of the key intersections, so that
Sure.
people don't get confused. But again, I've nixed that idea for the time being. But maybe in a couple years, I'd like to discuss it again, but communicate it better.
Sure.
And to the extent that people still don't want it, I would pose the question: how can we better utilize that fifth lane that's really kind of a wasted resource at this point? And by the way, our public works people totally agree that it's a wasted resource. The local governments, at least in Florida, from what I understand, they're not doing the 5-lane concept anymore with the suicide lane. They've just realized that it's not a great setup.
I mean, probably somewhere 20 years ago,
Yeah.
30 years ago was thought to be good.
Yeah.
What about the possibility of a back and forth semi-rail system that just went one way and then back?
I've
One way and back.
I've actually thought of that for that center lane as well. Remember I talked about BRT a few minutes ago,
Right.
Bus Rapid Transit, which is a rubber-tired mass transit option. I could definitely see a fifth lane on Bloomingdale being utilized as a BRT way, whether it's down the center or whether the road's reconfigured and it's on one side of the road or the other. But that's something I'd love to talk about with the community as well.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that makes sense.
Yep.
And so, again, misinformation creates controversy and chaos.
Yes.
And so when I first heard that, I thought there's just no way that would work. And then business owners were outraged, right? I'm sure you sat in like a town hall style meeting and people were ready to throw tomatoes at you.
Yep.
That's a tough one to take, especially when your intent wasn't what was conveyed.
Yes, absolutely.
And so that's why I'm glad we can open that up and share that here today.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, there's been talk a little bit about how, you know, the governor had kind of nixed the whole idea of the rail, couple $1 billion
Yep.
in money. And so you mentioned that you're Republican, and so by default you would probably follow with, you know, fiscally responsible.
Yep.
Right? Is that part of the reason why that wasn't happening, especially when we need it desperately here?
Yeah, I think so, but I'm pleased to see, though, that we now have a proposal on the table to have a privately funded rail option that would ultimately connect Orlando to Tampa. So it took some time to get there, a little more time than many perhaps would have liked to have seen, but I think we're going to get there in the end without the taxpayers being on the hook for a large number of dollars. So.
And so that sounds great. I-4 is one of the most dangerous expressways in the whole country.
Yep.
We all know that.
Yep.
One of the reasons is because you have tourism, you have some very strange exit ramps and some very strange on-ramps.
Yep.
But let's say I don't care about Orlando, right? I care about right here, Hillsborough County, Tampa Bay area. I want to see something that gets me around maybe to the aquarium from a park and ride, or maybe into St. Pete.
Yep.
Where I don't have to sit on the Howard Franklin for an hour, right? I want to go see the Rays play, but I can't drive for 2.5 hours sitting there. I'm wasting a half a tank of gas.
Yep.
And so how does that factor? Is there something, an additional proposal that's going to have light rail and some better transportation?
So that really then moves from a state discussion to a county and a regional discussion. And we're always having those discussions at the MPO level, the county commission level. Certainly Pasco and Pinellas, you know, enter into that conversation as well when you start talking about those things. So the question becomes, you know, how do we pay for it, right? And then what's the right option? So is it rail? Is it BRT? Is it something else? I'll tell you something that the business community has really gotten behind. Is some enhancements. It's actually a proposed BRT system, bus rapid transit system, that would connect Wesley Chapel, which is in Pasco. It would go through Hillsborough and then into Pinellas, and it would be part of the interstate
Like a
system.
J shape?
Correct, and it would create dedicated lanes for a BRT, you know, that's part of the interstate system.
Would that
The
require an
business-
expansion on the expressway?
My understanding is yes, and again, the business community is strongly behind that proposal, and that's something that I'm watching very closely. It's still really in its infancy, but it's something that's being discussed at this
That's
point.
interesting.
Yes.
There was one point where we were hearing talk of maybe a couple years ago about a rail system that runs on top of the Leroy Selman,
Yeah.
but that obviously
Yeah.
did not develop.
That did not develop, but we do have right of way though within the interstate system that would allow for some type of mass transit, and at this point it's BRT that's being discussed.
Okay.
So, and that's a project that would be done in conjunction with the Florida Department of Transportation, by the way. So it would be kind of a bold new concept, coming
There's a
forth.
portion that's
So,
also privately owned, right? Or there's the company with the Leroy Selman.
well, I don't know that privately owned would be the right term, but there's an independent agency that oversees the Selman Expressway. That's the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority.
Okay.
And you're right, that's independent of the county commission, the Tampa City Council. It's independent of any other local government. So
Okay.
we do have a county commissioner that sits on the Expressway Authority. It's one of those outside boards that I mentioned.
Right.
I don't sit on that one. Commissioner Les Miller sits on that one, but
Right.
but that's the agency that oversees the Selman Expressway.
So there's obviously many different options. We're growing rapidly.
Yep.
You'll have communities of maybe 1,000 homes
Yep.
that spills out and into a road where people are waiting 20 minutes.
Yeah.
No one's letting
So-
them
so-
in. Everyone's,
It's the same roads that service this area when we had a lot of cattle ranches and orange groves and things like that. That's that poor planning of the past that
Sure,
I've mentioned.
sure.
And we have to correct that moving forward.
Yeah. So in order for me to get here today, it normally takes me 12 minutes to get from home to here. Today it took me about 40. For the first couple of weeks of school.
First couple of weeks of school are always tough.
Why is that? Don't
Yeah.
parents understand that they ride those same roads anyway?
They
Are they looking for ride
they-
sharing? Maybe
they-
they didn't get to that yet.
Yeah, they do. So my sort of theory on that is that, the first couple of weeks of school, everyone wants to make sure they're at school not only on time but a little early. So you sort of have everyone converging on the school at the exact same time. What I've noticed as a couple of weeks pass, parents sort of figure out their routine, and they start to spread out over more of a half hour, 40-minute period versus everyone just converging on the school at the same time. And that's my theory on why that typically works its way out once school's been in session for a couple of weeks. So
It 100% changes.
it
I mean,
does. Yeah.
I can drive in a month and there'll be no problem.
Yep.
Like, there'll be some traffic, but nowhere near
Yep.
what I'm facing. I
Absolutely.
literally, I've aborted meetings. I say, there's just no way.
Yeah.
I have to turn around. There's no reason to go there and stay 5
Absolutely.
minutes.
Absolutely. You have a lot of teachers that take the summer off. A lot of families vacation over the summer. So then school starts
Snowbirds
back.
go home.
That's right.
Yeah.
School starts back. Everybody's back home, back to work. Everybody's converging on the school at the same time. So you take high school, for example. I think their new bell time this year is 8:25 or something like that. So you're going to have everybody converging on that school by 10 after 8 or so,
Sure.
maybe 8 o'clock. As time goes on, you'll find that the early birds will trickle in at 8, 8:05, and then you'll have people that'll show up at 8:10, 8:15, and then you'll have the last minute crowd that's just getting there in time. And just having it spread out over that half hour period can make a big difference on traffic. That's, again, sort of my theory on why it's so bad for those first couple of weeks.
I can see that.
So,
I think what seems odd to me is that people just conform and say that's just what it is the first month.
yeah,
I'm like, there's just no way I need to
Yeah.
add another 40 minutes to my commute.
yeah,
My daughter, let's take Morenin for instance.
yeah,
So Durant is a mile of traffic that just sits there.
yep,
And if I pull in and try to turn left from, let's say, Miller or, St. Cloud, People just giving me this look. They
Yeah.
shake their head and they say, not even close, buddy.
Yeah.
And so I go all the way around to Morenin, and then
Yeah.
there's just another mile of traffic, and I'm thinking, I have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
So you'll have maybe 50 cars pulled over on the side of the road in the grass,
Yep. Illegally.
illegally, waiting for the student to cross illegally
Yep.
and unsafely because they can't donate an hour to nothingness.
Yep.
And so that's a problem as well.
It is.
But we're dealing
Yeah.
with a two-lane road, one lane each way.
The same road that serviced the area when it was orange groves, and that,
But it's only backed up during that time.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
that's the justification of saying, well, it's only backed up during this time, right? There's something
So
to be said for that.
There
You
is.
don't want to spend
and
$20 million for
There-
a road that's not widened, that doesn't need to be widened 22 hours of the day.
That's correct. So you've actually brought up a great point. So one thing that I've championed is to have the county traffic engineers working closely in conjunction with school district staff. Oftentimes it's just as simple as the school principal or school personnel not properly queuing the traffic onto their campus. So for example, I received an automated phone call from the principal at Mulren a week or so back explaining that sixth graders are now going to be dropped off on the back of the school where they have more queuing available. Admittedly, I've not really driven through there during that time to see
I
if
don't
it's
suggest
helped.
that.
So, but by and large, I see principals working with county traffic engineers, which they don't have to, by the way. It's just, they just agree to accept
Well,
our
concern
advice
for
and
children's
counsel.
safety,
So,
the area, the immediate region around the school that they're
Yeah.
steward of. I can see that.
so Strawberry Crest, for example, high
Which
school.
my daughter just graduated from Strawberry Crest, so we have that problem as well.
Yes. So the principal, because of the traffic queuing, had traffic spilling out on the 92. Our traffic engineers suggested a different queuing pattern. It worked. Unfortunately, my understanding is that that has since been abandoned and they're back to the same queuing pattern. But to the extent that we can get the school system to work with us and better queue the traffic onto their campuses, that does help with the adjacent county roads.
Yeah,
So-
well, with 92 and Strawberry Crest, there's no other option.
Well, so what the principal was doing was queuing the traffic up Gallagher and then around that real small turn where the administrative offices are.
Now they put it into the parking lot.
That's what the county engineers had suggested, and to me it seemed to be working to get traffic off 92. My understanding, though, is that the principal has since abandoned that and has gone back to the original queuing pattern. But sometimes just a simple fix like that can help tremendously.
Well, we've spent all year going at the suggestion of the traffic engineers. We went
Yep.
through.
Yep.
I mean, we did that
Yeah.
for pickup and drop off.
And I think it helped.
Sure,
Yeah.
it reduced the amount of the length of cars probably by 100.
Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I can see that.
Yep,
But I mean, obviously, we have a lot of problems. Mulrennan doesn't have that space.
yeah.
Mulrennan has this 2-lane funnel into 1 lane.
Yeah, and I don't, I wasn't on the school board when that school was designed, but they do not have enough queuing space in the front of that school. It's really inadequate. So
I agree.
So again, looking forward, just better planning. When new schools are built, I hope that the school district will work with the county and take advice from our traffic engineers. And, to the extent that we can queue these cars onto campus, it helps tremendously with the adjacent roads.
Yeah. There's some people that'll probably say, well, let's start with the traffic engineers getting the lighting like staggered correctly, like red lights, right?
Yep.
You go from one corner to the next, it's a red light.
Yep.
And as you're waiting at the next light, 100 feet away is a green light. And
Yep.
as you go, right? So I've witnessed that a lot.
So that's actually known as ATMS, Advanced Traffic Management Systems, I believe what that stands for. That is really expensive to do, believe it or not. They're really highly engineered, they have to really do some pretty complex traffic studies and everything. But I tell you, again, pointing to the fact that I'm so deeply rooted here, I can remember Lumsden Road before they had ATMS in place, and it was a nightmare. It was exactly what you're talking about. You'd hit a red light, the next light would be green, you'd go, by the time you got to it, it'd be red, and it would take you 25 minutes just to get out of the Brandon area on Lumsden. But they've instituted the ATMS system, and I know when I jump on Lumsden at Lithia Pinecrest, it's smooth sailing for me all the way to Kings. So it's made a tremendous difference there.
And so what's that, about a mile and a half?
Maybe a little more, maybe a couple, 2 or 3 miles maybe at the most.
Then you can go another 2.5 miles with just 1 or 2 lights in between.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but yes, we are putting ATMS in place every chance we get. But it's more complicated though than you might imagine. They have to do some pretty detailed traffic studies to get it right.
You put one guy in the room, lock the door, don't come out until you fix this.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yep.
That's what most people would think it is.
Absolutely.
How hard is that? Press the button, do the thing.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yep.
So yeah, you're answering a lot of questions that people probably have, and they don't understand the in-depth amount of responsibility and task that it requires.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously our community is growing very rapidly, very quickly.
Yep.
I say Brandon, but it's kind of the greater Brandon.
The greater
as well.
Brandon area, right. Brandon, Valrico. To some degree, you can even pull parts of Seffner and parts of Riverview into that.
Yeah.
Fishhawk arguably is part of the greater Brandon area.
Sure, sure.
So.
And so you have Big Bend, which we're going to call Riverview, right?
Yep.
Not necessarily Apollo Beach.
Yep.
So there's the initiative to change that on-ramp at 75,
yep.
which is a nightmare.
So you're going to be pleased to hear that a widening of Big Bend from 41 all the way to 301 is, I'm going to say, just about fully funded. They're working on funding for one last little piece sort of between the interstate and 301, and the Florida Department of Transportation has already committed to reconfigure the interchanges, and they have plans in place for those. But I'm not going to try to kid anybody here. We're a good, at least 5 years from seeing that come to fruition. But the good news is it's all but funded. FDOT is ready to move on their piece. I'd say realistically in 5 years we could see a totally new scenario there, a widened road and interchanges that make better sense than what they do today. That strange left turn onto the interstate worked really well back when Big Bend was just a rural road.
Coming from 301?
Correct.
Yeah.
But now it doesn't.
Patrick's even like, yeah, that's crazy.
Now it doesn't make so much sense. So they're going to reconfigure that. They're gonna.
So 2 days a week, I stay down in Apollo Beach, and I have to come back up to this area in the morning.
Yep.
And I've sat there.
Yep. Just
to turn right to go north on 75.
Yep.
As I watch maybe 50 cars make that left from 301, and I'm like, who designed this?
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense. And sometimes there's a police officer or a deputy sheriff on a motorcycle.
Yep.
Getting people that go through the light.
Yep.
And it's a challenge because you have 2 lanes feeding into one on an on-ramp that has a tight curve.
Yep.
That's dangerous. And let's add a couple of trucks with trusses on them for, builders, maybe 6 trucks with trusses. Yeah, what is that? I don't know. It's 10 tons.
Yeah.
It's just really dangerous. And so why would it take so long to do that? You said it's funded. You said FDOT's ready. Everyone's standing there at the starting line, and they're like, just hang out for 5 years. We'll get back to you.
Well, no, I'm talking about 5 years to completion.
Yeah,
So
most people listening to this are going to say 5 years.
Yeah,
that's a lot of overtime.
I get it. Yeah, but they have required PD&E studies. They've got to get the boots on the ground. They've got to get the widening in place. Doing the interchanges is not going to be a simple task. So, I just wanted to be straight with the listeners.
Sure, that's good.
I'm not saying that it's going to be done tomorrow, but I think we're looking at a fairly aggressive timeline. But that's another situation where someone during some past era that's before our time just didn't plan for future growth, because that was all fine and swell back when Big Bend was essentially a rural road, but it doesn't work now.
It was the only road you want to see manatees, go to Big Bend.
Absolutely.
And so getting off of 75 at that same location, there's probably 4 accidents per week of being rear-ended.
I don't doubt it.
Something going to be done there? Is that part of that initiative?
Oh, it is.
You'll need
Absolutely.
an off-ramp that's more than one lane.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know this really doesn't benefit your viewers and listeners,
It may.
but I'll get you a copy of the plans so that you can take a look at them and see.
I'd love that.
See what's in the
I may
pipeline.
have to hire a civil engineer to explain it to me, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, overall, these are questions that people will probably ask, and I love the
Absolutely.
fact that we can get you to explain that a little bit more.
Absolutely.
That's why we have you here as the expert.
Absolutely.
Right? And so
yeah.
we're,
So many people when they're making their decisions in elections, get a 30-second soundbite or they get a mail piece in the mail, and some of this stuff is really complex and really takes some time to explain. So I'm glad that I have the opportunity to be here today to let people know what's in the pipeline and what the timeline is and what the rationale sort of is behind some of this stuff.
yeah, it's important. Better than just checking boxes, making assumptions, right?
Yep.
I've sat with you in meetings where you were able to explain things, and I go, now it makes total sense. Whoever was explaining that before wasn't doing the same great job.
Yep.
And maybe because they didn't understand it fully.
Yep, could be.
So maybe they get a pass on that, but it's important to understand some of the changes that are happening. Now, I mean, we don't have, millions of viewers all around the world, but we're focusing right here locally.
Absolutely. That's what
locally
it's all
in our
about.
community. Yeah, we'll fan out and we'll be able to have conversations about things that aren't directly impacting us, or maybe they are, just not right now.
Yeah.
But more importantly, transportation. I mean, it may be on the ballot. We have that, and we have, tons of different things. And having someone like you who has that experience is important for us. So we're glad to have that opportunity.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about, all the schools and stuff like that are, popping up, right? We're talking about charter schools versus public schools.
Yep.
Your children went to public school.
Yes.
Is there a reason they went to public school over charter school?
Absolutely. So, not to split hairs here, but as a former school board member, I always like to say traditional public school, because what some viewers or listeners may not be aware of is that charter schools are technically public schools. They're publicly funded with tax dollars, but they're sort of overseen by an independent board that's independent of the school board of Hillsborough County. But I'm a big supporter and big believer in our traditional public school system, not only here in Hillsborough County in the state of Florida, but in this country. I mean, that's been our traditional public school system has been the backbone of this country. I've, in serving on the school board and as a parent, I can point to my wife. She's been PTA, PTSA president at both Buckhorn Elementary and Mullerin Middle School. My wife, after being a stay-at-home mom for about 17 years, recently went back into teaching at Mullerin. So she's a teacher in our school system. I just can't express enough how much I believe in and more importantly, support our traditional public school system. And, that's why I have my kids enrolled in it. It's the backbone of our country. We have a lot of great teachers out there that put their heart and soul into it, and I continue to believe that kids get an excellent education here in the Hillsborough County school system.
Okay. What about the thought process of, well, competition is always good, right? And and to rebut those people who say, well, you're giving money to privately owned business, right?
Yep.
And so you can say, well, the money follows the student.
Yep.
And it's good to have some competition.
I think choice and competition is great. So I also support those that do choose a charter school or a private school or even homeschooling. The homeschooling movement has caught on like wildfire. And I've seen a lot of smart kids that have been really successful that have come up through a homeschool environment.
You mean like Florida Virtual or just homeschool in general?
Homeschool in general, but homeschool families oftentimes will utilize Florida Virtual School or some other system, to help with teaching their kids, calculus and physics and some of this real difficult stuff. that the parents, might be a little rusty on. But getting back to the charter school discussion, though, I'm of the belief that we do have some bad players in the charter school arena, but I can also point to some charter schools that are tremendous assets to this community. LLT, right down the street
LLT,
here,
sure.
they do a wonderful job. Pepin Academies, they serve an incredibly important niche. So charter schools, they do provide options, choice, sometimes competition. But look, there are bad players in that industry. So, of course, that's more of a state level policy issue that would lend itself more to a discussion with a state legislator. But, I would say at the state level, the big policy question would be, how do we support the LLTs and the Pepin Academies and weed out the bad players? I don't know the answer
You may not
to that.
be able
but
to. Right?
that-
So
yeah,
there are bad players throughout.
Absolutely.
Right? And so you mentioned the traditional public school system being the backbone of the country.
Yep.
However, the format, the layout, the basic system hasn't changed much in 50 years, right? And so what about the ability to evolve and change and upgrade and all those different things? Obviously, Hillsborough County School District is eighth largest in the nation.
Yep.
That's a heavy load. In addition to that, schools are aging. In addition to that, maintenance catching up. And then you have some new schools being built, and they may not consult the traffic engineers.
Yep.
And so you have both of those things happening at the same time. And so you also have this school system that you obviously believe in very firmly.
Yep.
And then you have, well, it hasn't changed much, and everything else in our society is changing rapidly.
Yeah. So I have no issue at all with evolving and changing in business and government and our school system. So I think evolving and changing is important.
Yeah.
So
I certainly agree. And so, we kind of go back and forth. We were going to move my son from Mulren, and we decided to keep him there.
yeah.
I don't know about if the traffic lasts much longer than that, I'll probably homeschool him.
Yeah.
So talk to us more about how people can, recognize the fact that they're in your district, and some of the things you want to do, and how they can help you, get reelected.
Sure. If you live east of I-75, if you live in the Dover Plant City area, down south if you live in Sun City Center or the southern part of Ruskin, south of College Avenue, chances are I'm in your district. If you're not sure, you can either check at the Supervisor of Elections office at www.votehillsboro.org, or you can just take a look at your general election sample ballot or the actual ballot, and if the District 4 race is on there, I would be honored and encourage those that are watching to vote for Stacy White. I'm a dedicated public official, and I want to continue to do good things for this community.
I love that. And I started to laugh when you said, take a look at the sample ballot, because how many people are doing that? Right?
Yeah.
And then most people are patting their pants going, I don't know what my voter's registration card is.
Yeah.
Haven't seen it since the last time I voted.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
So what do you think about, we weren't winding up, but what do you think about people requiring an ID to vote?
I'm quite frankly, I'm a believer in that. I mean, we have to show an ID to carry out so many other basic functions in this country. I see no issue with being required to prove your identity if you're going to do something as important as cast a vote in an election in this country.
I agree with that 100%.
Yep.
I know there are some advocacy groups that say it's discriminatory.
Yeah.
I don't think carrying your ID is discriminatory.
Yeah.
I don't think using your ID to cast a vote is discriminatory. We need to know who you are.
Absolutely.
And so I just wanted to touch on that because, this is a very weird, unusual election cycle right
Yes,
now,
it is.
especially for us here.
Yes.
In not only in Florida, but I mean in the county, and then other people are doing other things. Great. But I care about what's happening right here.
So do I. That's why I'm a local elected official.
And I'm happy to have you. And
Thank
I
you.
think I fall in your district. We're in Seffner.
Okay,
And
thank
so
you.
I think we fall in your district.
Yes, sir.
Anything else you'd like to share?
I tell you, this has been a thorough interview, but it's much appreciated. We've touched on some very important topics, critically important topics, and I just appreciate the opportunity to spend this time with you and talk about these things.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, Commissioner, and I know that you're busy. Obviously, primaries are coming up very soon, but that doesn't affect you as much.
Right.
But you have a campaign to run and an election to win.
We're doing it.
So we
Yes, sir.
appreciate you coming out. Thank
My
you so
pleasure.
much.
Thank you. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner Stacy White.
Thank you.
Thank you.